Thank you for joining us for the Miami Valley Salute to Veterans. I'm Bob Daly, a volunteer host for the Miami Valley Communications Council. Longtime volunteer for the Communications Council, I learned the tricks of the trade by covering city council meetings in Bellbrook and Centerville. I'm an old newspaper man and well aware of the need for an informed public. Public access television helps fulfill that need. We hope that hearing these memories from the veterans of our community will help us all better understand the dedication of those who serve. And with me this morning is Robert Kinsez of Centerville and a Marine veteran who served the year from 1967 till 1973. He'll tell us a story in his time in the military. But first, let's get acquainted with Robert. Born in Centerville, you Centerville boy?
No, I was born in Dayton, Ohio, at Good Sam Hospital.
What year was that?
1947.
47. We moved to 2218 Salem Avenue in January 1947. If I had known, we'd have been out there celebrating your arrival. Tell me, what did you grew up in Dayton?
Well, my father was a native Daytonian. He was first-generation American. His parents had come from Hungary.
Is that right?
And he grew up on the west side of Dayton, just a couple blocks from the Dunbar House. And he went to Roosevelt High School.
Roosevelt High School.
And then when I was born at Good Sam, my parents moved us, the family of three, to my grandmother's farm in Trotwood. And so the journey began, and I was there for a year living in a renovated garage. And my father decided he wanted a small farm of his own, so he found some acreage in Preble County.
Did you go up then in Preble County? Where did you go to high school?
I went to Twin Valley South High School.
Twin Valley South.
It was a consolidated school of Lanier Township and the village of West Ellick, and they renamed it Twin Valley South.
Twin Valley South. Okay, when did you go into the military? 1967.
I went in September the 11th, which is an interesting date, both in my history and the nation's history. And it's also my sister's birthday.
Is that right?
And so the journey in the military begun September the 11th.
Were you drafted?
Well, initially I was. I was drafted into the Army and then panicked and tried to get into the Air Force. I had been at Miami University taking many classes, and I was also in Air Force ROTC. And so I thought I would have a chance to dodge the draft and get into the Air Force, but it didn't work because the Air Force says, well, we'd love to have you, but we don't have an opening, and it'd be 2 weeks after you're supposed to be in the Army. You would be therefore absent without leave. So, dejected, I dropped my head and walked next door to the Marines. And they gladly accepted me right there on the spot.
And where did you start out? What did you do initially? Where did you go for basic?
Well, I, of course, was sworn in Cincinnati and swore allegiance to the Constitution. Then I was sent to San Diego because Paris Island was booked solid. And when I got to San Diego, I was trained and housed in a 10-person tent with field showers. So it wasn't what some Marines sort of say Paris Island is this difficult space and place. Well, you could see freedom outside because we were right by the airport, and all you had to do to get out was scale the fence and try to get on an aircraft. But the 10-person tent was certainly an experience.
That's pretty close living, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. How long were you there?
12 weeks.
And then what?
Then we were sent to Camp Pendleton for the advanced infantry training, which is, again, further training for ultimately what Marines are sent to do, and that's to fight. This may sound harsh. Bottom line is we're trained killers. And as much as that is one of the foundational principles of the Marines, that started a process for me as could I really face another human being and kill them? And of course, they noted that in my training because they don't want you to die. And they want you to really be there for your fellow Marines and succeed in the mission.
How did they determine that you had some reticence about shooting another?
That, I believe, is my behavior, and just there's a knowing. They're trained to see if you have the right stuff. And these are, I would not say hardened. They're not hardened to the point of criminality. They just understand their mission when given a legal order is to execute that.
Yes, yes.
And so I would never paint a broad picture of the Marines and how they train us is in some sort of way of being part of a criminal operation. We are certainly guided by principles and humane treatment.
Do you remember how long were you there then in that training?
That was 5 weeks.
5 weeks.
Right.
And then what MOS did you have?
I was 4071 right out of boot camp, which is quite unusual because they usually assign a general MOS and you're sent to that particular school. And then after graduating from a school, they give you a more specific MOS. My MOS, I was one of the fortunate Marines at that particular time, is in computers, and it has to do with database development. And so I was one of those early participants in modern computers, after which I was sent to Quantico, Virginia, to computer science school.
How long were you there?
3 months.
3 months, and then what?
Well, we were assigned to our next duty station, and I was in the second class that graduated from Quantico, and this was a new school. And in fact, we had other services that were sent to this particular school. I was sent to Kansas City, Missouri, and those out there perhaps are not familiar with Marines being stationed in Kansas City, Missouri.
Yes.
And I was assigned to a special project called the Manpower Management System, which had been developed by the Commandant of the Marine Corps. And the Commandant of the Marine Corps is the top position for the Marines. It's a 4-star position in which he oversees all aspects of Marine Corps activity.
Oh, yes. And how long were you there? Was that
Actually, I was there all of my enlistment time.
Oh,
However, because of the nature of the project, I was a programmer, an analyst, a database developer, and then they needed people to deploy the system. And we were the only authorized group of personnel in the Marine Corps that was able and permitted to deploy this manpower management system. There were 16 of us in this office, from officers down to enlisted. I rose very quickly in my rank. I achieved Sergeant E5 in less than 2 years and was randomly chosen to go to various bases here in the United States and overseas. The main places overseas were Okinawa and Vietnam.
Oh.
And so the journey began.
Oh. So you did leave the United States and go to some of these places?
I did.
Okay.
I did. And here is one of those positive consequences. I was fortunate that I was chosen to do this work because there had been trust established that I was capable. And when I went overseas, my first set of orders said Okinawa and Vietnam. I was replacing a staff sergeant who was in charge of all the Western Pacific operations. That's a large area to be in charge of. And he was an E6 and I'm an E5, so now I'm stepping into his shoes. I probably would never have gone overseas. The E6 had emergency leave because his mother was gravely ill and he returned home, and his home was Canada. He decided that he had had enough of the Marine Corps and he did not return to his overseas duty assignment. And so they needed a replacement, and I was chosen. And I was very successful in my career.
Did you see any combat over in Vietnam?
No, I was not deployed to Vietnam. I was only to be deployed if indeed there was a serious problem. And during my short period of time, which were 3 months, there wasn't any sort of disaster that needed my attention. Those minor problems, I spoke with computer people in Da Nang over a Mars station operation. And again, very fortunate that I was not deployed or needed in Vietnam during my particular short time. The the situation is such that we, as Marines, know our basic training tells us we're first and foremost a rifleman. So they kept me out of Vietnam, I think, because of the level of work I did.
Oh, sure.
Not-
So there was some advantage.
yes.
Yes. Well, if you're just joining us, this is Miami Valley Communications Council Salute to Veterans podcast. I am your host, Bob Daly, and today we are talking with Robert Kinsez, a Centerville Marine who served in the Marines from 1967 to 1973. So what was, how long were you overseas? How long were you in Okinawa?
Well, I was at Camp Smedley Butler, named for a famous Marine. Camp Smedley Butler was the recipient of 2 Medal of Honors during his service. I was overseas for 3 months in Okinawa.
Okinawa. And then what happened after those 3 months?
Well, I came back to Kansas City to my home station, and it was close to my time of either making a decision to stay in the Marine Corps or to get out. So I met with a Marine Master Sergeant, that's an E8, and he was giving me all the benefits of my staying in the Marine Corps, since I was in a unique category, essential personnel. I was offered $16,000 for my reenlistment. It was the top of the line as far as the bonus dollars. They were willing to send me to any college in the country to finish my degree work and then send me to OCS, Officers Training School. And I was on the verge of re-up when the recruiting NCO spoke and said, well, I see you're from Ohio. And before I could really respond, and he said, he asked a question, what did I think about Kent State? I had just returned from overseas on an airplane full of combat Marines, very quiet, and they had this 1,000-mile stare. The shock and the terror that they had seen was obvious. And I reflected back on my trip. Then I reflected back on my having gone to Miami University, and this recruiting sergeant, before I could even respond to his question of what did I think about Kent State, he turned to me and with cold eyes said he would have taken a mortar platoon and killed all the students. I was not in a mood to hear that, and he had, in my mind, just cut the conversation off. I know that this was his own personal feelings, and he had been in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. So you can only think of all that he had experienced. And while I could not find the words to respond, I chose to be silent. And then when he asked me, after he shared more about the benefits of staying in the Marine Corps, I said at this time I will not be re-enlisting in the Marines. I have many years, of course, to reflect upon that choice. I think I was wise in making that decision because, quite frankly, violence is not really part of my person.
Mm-hmm. Was that the low point of your 6 years with the Marines, with the service?
It was. And however, what happens when I stepped out of being active duty,
Mm-hmm.
they place you in what's called a ready reserve.
Oh, yes.
And I had 3 years active duty and 3 years ready reserve.
Oh, I see.
And what was nice about the ready reserves during that particular time I served, I did not have to attend any sort of training exercises.
Mm-hmm.
And what was also amazing, it was almost a year after I had gotten out of the Marines that I received a phone call from the reserve unit here in Dayton, Ohio. He informed me that I had been awarded the Navy Achievement Medal
Uh-huh.
for my work in the Marine Corps.
Uh-huh.
And that the Department of the Navy and the chair of the Navy Department
Mm-hmm.
had signed off on this.
Uh-huh.
And the Commandant of the Marine Corps had written
Yeah.
a personal letter of thanks and
Wow.
service.
That's impressive. That must have made you feel good.
Well, it brought to me the maintaining of what I believe is personal integrity, to do the job, to do the work that needs to be done, and to the highest level of one's capability. I constantly try to achieve that, and it was rewarding that it was recognized.
Mm-hmm.
And all along, I'm not a person who is looking to perform for any individual. I hopefully take in what is the project or mission and to do my part.
Would that have been, that summary of your experience, be the best part of having been in the Marines?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. The consistency, speaking truth to power at time, and yet focused on the mission where you understand you fit in with
Yes.
that.
You are obviously a proud veteran of the U.S. military force. With your Marines hat, and I can see Marines and the Vietnam veteran and on your shoulders. What makes you, in your recollections of what happened, what are you most proud of?
The people that I met, the diversity of those who chose to be, or even those draftees. We did have draft personnel in the Marine Corps during the Vietnam era. And once again, that was because of shortages in the Corps. And I met a young man from Southern California, well-educated, Jewish, and he had been drafted. I met a young man who came from New Jersey and had joined the Marine Corps on a buddy system. And he was a fantastic computer person. His friend that came in on the buddy system, unfortunately, was in Vietnam. And as he was cleaning a 45, it discharged and he was killed. And he got that message and he volunteered to escort his friend's body back to their hometown.
Oh, boy. Uh-huh.
I was volunteered in my early part of my active duty to be part of a burial duty. It was one of the most impactful times in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It was in the middle of Missouri, and we arrived as stoic Marines and somber and sat in the church while the parents were there with the coffin. It was a closed coffin because we had been told, and the parents weren't told, that there were only body parts in this coffin. I cannot remove the crying that the mother was expressing. It was very emotional, and I found myself writing my mother a letter about the experience, and for 10 years or more, I could not, without breaking down, tell this incident.
You are obviously a proud veteran. In 1966, there were a lot of young men who were avoiding the draft. Why didn't you?
That's not so much a difficult question. I felt that all in my high school education, there was an obligation to give back to this country. I'm blessed in the way that why did my birth happen here in the United States and not in Africa or not in Central America? I am very humble to accept that which I'm presented with. And my parents and my father had served in World War II. So there was perhaps this feeling of obligation. However, beyond that, I also feel wherever I land, it's to make the best of my circumstance. Life gives us choice, and sometimes we don't understand all the benefits or all the consequences. I have been richly surrounded by people like yourself and others who I can learn from.
What was your best experience in that 3 years in active duty and 3 years in the reserves?
Well, as far as in the reserves, it was the best when I received the award from the Department of the Navy. It's nice to display an object, but the best part, again, is the relationships overall, both in the active duty area and the reserve area.
Yeah.
I'm a quiet, sort of introverted person, and yet I get joy, and I can use joy as the word that I love to listen to story. And that helps with embracing my fellow human beings.
What did you do then when you were discharged? You finished your reserve duty. What did you do?
Well, I went back to Wright State University. Wasn't really prepared for some of the changes as far as from the military, where one is very built on camaraderie and a depth of relationship. And so that was kind of a shock. And so I went and transferred to Sinclair Community College and pursued a degree in biology and graduated with honors. from Sinclair and was a member of the Honor Society. And I began to do volunteer work in the community. Then I went to University of Cincinnati and pursued a degree in natural science and computer science, and did that in a night college. I was fortunate that I got a job at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base as a computer specialist and was very active in many programs with the Materials Laboratory, which is a research arm of the Air Force.
Are there concerns in adjusting to civilian life?
Well, certainly, I had heard that some of our veterans during that Vietnam time frame had been more or less not warmly welcomed home. My family embraced me, and my small community embraced me. And so therefore I did not really experience that aspect of not being welcome. And one of the other things, there's this mythology about Marines being the toughest and the few, and what's the Marine? You never ever do you return to a civilian sort of person. I was buffered, I think, in a way from some of that, which the general public was sort of speaking to.
Yeah. Did you join a veterans organization?
I did not immediately do so. I did join the Vietnam Veterans of America in the year 2000. And that was after reflection. And I had been aware of the psychological wounds that were being carried by veterans who served during that time frame. And I also signed up to volunteer at the Dayton VA in a way to hopefully open the door from that perhaps painful part of their lives and say there is more life to be lived, and why don't you
get on with it?
Right.
Yeah. Is there anything you've always wanted to share about your time in the service or your veterans experience, and you haven't?
Boy, I'm not a big fan of behaving in a manner that I sit around and sort of reminisce and bring my story as the center point. I love adding to what I consider value add. And of course, that takes discernment. And invited to share, I will do so. Just as this invitation sort of is limited in what I'm sharing, as all of us have only so much time to share in the relationship. And I'm thankful to do so. Be yourself. Be who you are at this moment in time as you understand. And I believe that life is a big classroom, start to finish. We're always learning, at least that's what I hope. I also may have been naive. My mother would caution me as to my being open. She wanted me not to be the doormat or someone taking advantage of me.
Well, we're about out of time on this interview. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to put? This tape will be here for part of Dayton's history and part of the history of the community. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I brought two quotes, and one of which is, "What is a veteran? A veteran, whether active duty, discharged, retired, or reserve, is someone who, at one point in his life or her life, wrote a blank check made payable to the United States of America for an amount of up to and including his or her life. This honor, and there are way too many people in this country today who no longer understand that fact." And one of the other quotes is, "My parents were so generous in allowing us to read, us being my brother and sister, that one of the profound past Americans, Ralph Waldo Emerson, wrote, 'To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition, to know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded.'"
That's a perfect way to end this interview. Thank you, Robert Kinsess, and good luck.
Thank you, sir.